Hello everyone! So this week starts the launch of my newest book, The Alabaster Jar, and in honor of this launch week, I just wanted to share some quick facts about this book. Alright, so when I was getting ready to do this video, I decided to look at my Google Drive documents where I keep all my book stuff, and I just was curious about when I actually started this project. So the start date was about March of 2024. So it's been a little over 2 years since I started working on this one. I know last year I had finished writing the first draft by the end of 2024. And my plan was last year to sit down and go through and edit it and get it submitted to my publisher and get it out last year. And obviously that did not happen. I'm always saying this in my videos and posts, but God's timing is never my timing. And it always ends up being His timing is best, which is how it is. But it's just interesting to look back. I had so much life happening last year with different things, and I'm involved in a choir here in Colorado, and I was busy with that. My mom broke her shoulder really bad, so I was busy helping take care of her, and we just had tons of other things going on in life. So needless to say, I did not get back to editing my book last year until like the very end of the year, and I blitzed through it. Like I was reading all night, all day. Like I spent so much time editing it so I could get it into my publisher and different things. So the fact that it's finally out is such an amazing miracle, and I'm just so blessed by God to always be used by Him to write these books and share these stories with everyone. But it's finally out. But just a quick little fact, I started this back in March of 2024, so here we are a little over 2 years later. So some other quick facts, I was looking, it looks like it landed at about 36 chapters, so that's about average for my books. It's about 300 pages, so it's not a very long read, honestly, and I've been told my books are so exciting that people just can't put them down anyway, so they read through them pretty quickly. My mom is not a reader, so it's amazing that God has been using her to record my audiobooks, and I know she's always struggled with like dyslexia and just not being interested in reading because it's hard and stuff. So for her to be able to read these books and record them is amazing, and so I love that about the fact too. But it's just she's not a big reader, and so ever since she started reading my books a few years ago when they started coming out, she just told me she would text me at like 11 o'clock at night being like, I cannot put your book down and I have to read the next chapter to find out what's going on. So it's been fun to have her discover kind of that love for reading, kind of like I've always had my entire life. So it's a pretty quick read. I've had several people already reread Heart of God, the first book in the series, and also read through the second book since it released just a couple weeks ago. So pretty quick read. I have this sweet little 12-year-old boy in our church that he's not a big reader either, and he got a copy of Heart of God and he read through it, and he would ask his mom all the time if he could go read, and he actually reread it before my second book came out, and he was super excited to get the second book. So it's really, my books are great for all ages. They're clean, there's nothing you have to worry about, and they're full of Christian morals and truths and biblical foundations. So like I said, really quick read, so it will not take you long to read them. So if you're interested, go ahead and check them out and read them. Another fact about these books, when I started writing these books, it was kind of an interesting situation. We had been doing a Bible study at my church through Exodus, and it was just really impacting. And I remember reading about like the Ark of the Covenant and how God commanded them to put in Aaron's staff and a piece of manna and different things in the Ten Commandments. And these were just like kind of visible reminders of what God had done for them and the Israelites when they left Egypt. And so I don't know why my brain, the littlest things trigger it. If you're a writer, you know that. Whether you write songs or music or books or whatever you write, poems, sometimes inspiration just hits, and it just takes the littlest snippet of something to trigger something and get you going on an idea. So the idea triggered from that, and I just thought, I wonder what it would look like to have a secret group that's been formed to protect God's artifacts that reflect who he is and kind of prove his existence throughout history. And I love things like National Treasure. I love mysteries. And so the whole idea kind of just started as a spiral. And funny enough, I was actually finishing up editing my third book in my fairy tale series and getting ready to write the fourth book in that series. And so there was a period of time where I was literally, one weekend I would write in my Heart of God series, and it's completely contemporary, modern day, mystery, adventure, all that stuff. And my fairy tale series is like a completely opposite genre. So I would be writing in my Heart of God series one weekend, and then I would be writing in my fairy tale series the next weekend, and I would switch off editing. And so like just switching my brain to kind of like completely different genres and types of books and characters and storylines was kind of like an acrobatic circus in my head. But that's how this series came about, and it's just crazy to see how God has taken these books over the years and given me these stories to write, and I'm just so blessed to be used by him to write these. One of the really cool things about these books is just kind of how God has allowed me to use stories and accounts from the Bible to kind of go along the storylines and the characters of what they're facing in these books and kind of bring those stories to life in a real and relevant way in our world today. And so if you've read the first book, you know that Heart of God follows the story of King David in the Bible. And it kind of just ends up coinciding with the main character's storyline, Selah Cross. And you kind of see her being wrongfully accused of murder. She's been wrongfully accused of stealing an artifact from the museum. And so she's on the run, and she's never had to experience this kind of life. But I kind of just wove it together with David's story from the Bible. And he was on the run from King Saul and from his son and from various people in his life throughout his lifetime. So it's just really cool to kind of see how those pieces come together in the end when I'm writing these books. And I just love how much God works through them and works through the characters and the storylines. I know it always impacts my life when I'm reading through them and editing them and writing them in general. And it's just, like I've said, it's been such a blessing to have God write these stories through me, and I'm just so blessed. And writing for this second book, it was really cool. I've always loved the story of the alabaster jar in the Bible. And when I started doing this book, I actually discovered that the story of the woman pouring out her alabaster jar at Jesus's feet was in all four Gospels. So that was cool to start with, but there are a lot of stories that kind of end up in all four Gospels in the New Testament. But what was different about this one is the story I had picked was actually different. The one in Luke 7 is actually a different account than the ones in the other three Gospels. And I've posted several blogs or different videos kind of explaining that. But it was just really neat to see how God worked through this one. I've struggled a lot personally with some things over the last few years, and just my walk with God. Sometimes it's not always like hardcore on, and just experiencing different things. I struggle with trying to just let my faith rest in him and trust him to do what he's going to do with my life and his will for my life. And this book, the second book, Alabaster Jar, just really focuses on the main male character's faith journey. Dylan Kincaid has to kind of find out, is he going to let his faith in God be his own, or is it always going to be dependent on his relationship with Selah? And he kind of he's forced to find out where his heart with God lies personally. And Selah goes missing at one point, and so he really has to like focus on that and figure that out. And it really pushed me in my own faith journey as well, writing this, because I have gone through periods in my life where my faith has been dependent on my relationship with other people. And when that relationship failed and completely fell apart, my faith in God fell apart. And I've definitely gone through some rocky times where like I said, it fell apart, and I was just really hard. It's not that I didn't know God existed or didn't believe that he existed and was real, but my faith definitely went through that point where it wasn't fully dependent on him, and I had to kind of relearn how to trust in God and just believe in him for who he is in my life, and not dependent on what I think about God or what other people have influenced me to think about God, or even just how other people have influenced me to trust or believe. Like, people fail us all the time, and it's so hard sometimes to disconnect that relationship with people in the world that we interact with on a regular basis with our relationship with God. Like, it's so hard to remember that he is God and he is above everything. He created everything. He's overcome all darkness and death in this world. And so this book was really personal to me. A lot of my books end up being really personal, whether the characters or the storylines or just different things I'm going through at the time also in my life. So it's just been really cool. I keep saying this, but I am truly blessed to be used by God in this way. And I just love seeing how these stories come to life. And truly, pretty much since my second book of my fairy tale series, it's kind of really been God writing these stories and these characters, and he's just using me in such a way to share his love with the world and share his story. And I'm just blessed and humbled to be used like this. I am definitely not like this ultra perfect Christian and follower of God, and I make plenty of mistakes on my own, but the fact that he still uses me, even when I'm not trusting him or not following him the way I should be, it's just incredibly humbling, and I just am so blessed to be used by him in these ways. My hope in writing these books is always that people will just see his story through this and see his love and feel his love through the pages of these books. And it's just such a critical part of life, and finding your identity in him, and just remembering and being reminded that we are all God's masterpiece. We've all been carefully handcrafted by him, and he has such a beautiful purpose for our stories and our lives. So again, incredibly blessed and humbled, and I just always pray that these books reach people where they're at, and that they can see hope and light through these books and stories, and just feel God's love and his presence in their lives, and feel and experience that transformation and stuff. So I just really hope you guys read these books and enjoy them. Everyone who's read them loves them, so just try it, you'll like it. And I just hope you guys will be touched by God in a personal way when you read these. All right, so there are always interesting things that come up when I'm writing these books or editing them, and there's always stories to tell after the fact, and I've had characters just randomly create themselves in my books, or storylines just kind of take off on their own, and it's a real thing. Like, when authors say that the characters kind of hijack their story, they do sometimes, but it was really interesting and really, really cool. It's nothing short of a God moment in Alabaster Jar when I was editing it, but at the beginning of this year, when I was editing the Alabaster Jar, like I said, I was so trying to get this out for you guys. So I was spending every waking moment I could to read through them and read through it again and read through it again, and just make sure it's the best book that it can be for everyone. But when I was editing it, there's this really cool scene, and there's several really cool scenes in this book, but when I was editing this book, there's a really cool scene towards the end where Dylan is faced with coming to grips with where his relationship with God is going to be. And I was reading through this chapter, and it's this beautiful chapter. He's in the basement of this church that's believed to be the prison where Paul was held when he was in Rome towards the end of his life. And it's just this incredible moment. If you haven't read it yet, go ahead and read it, because it will touch your life and hopefully transform you as well, and just to reveal a little bit of God's glory to your life. But it was just really cool, because I was reading it and I was in my living room just reading through that chapter, and getting to that chapter, several other chapters in the book, I'm always just like, oh, like, this is so good and so of God. But as I was reading that chapter, on the radio, just out of the blue, a version of All in All came on, and it just started like really soft, and it was very sacred, and like it just grew and swelled as I was reading this chapter about Dylan's conversion and his surrender to God. And it just was one of the most amazing things. Like, it's not anything I could have orchestrated. It's not anything I could have planned if I tried. Like, it was just so incredible. And it just, I know I've been in productions where the music is so critical to like certain moments, and I was able to be a part of this. We call them Good Friday monologues in college, and the music that our professor picked to go along with those monologues, it swells, and it's quiet in the right moments, and then it just swells at that critical moment when you're just sharing God's love and God's gospel. And I don't know, you just like get chills in those moments. And this was definitely one of those moments when I was reading through this chapter in the Alabaster Jar. And man, I don't, just even thinking about trying to recreate that moment just gives me chills. But I just wanted to share that because it's just, he always gives us those special moments. And I'm always just so blessed and amazed when those moments happen. And like I said, it was just like perfect. And if I could try, I couldn't orchestrate it that well. So I just wanted to share that little snippet from doing this book and doing the edits on it earlier this year. But God is good, and I'm constantly working to trust in Him and walk with Him. So it's always just cool to see those moments when He shows up in even just the littlest things. So